My husband stood up at our daughter's rehearsal dinner, champagne glass in hand, and announced he was leaving me for his business partner. In front of 93 guests, including my parents. The words hit me like ice water. "I've decided it's time for a fresh start," Richard said, his voice steady, confident. "Margaret and I have built something beautiful together, and I can't pretend anymore." Margaret Wilkes, his business partner of 12 years. The woman who'd sat at our Christmas table, who'd helped plan this very wedding, who'd hugged me just an hour earlier and told me how lucky Richard was to have me. The silence in the room was deafening. Our daughter Jessica sat frozen, her fiancé Marcus reaching for her hand. My son David dropped his fork, the clatter echoing like a gunshot. But here's what Richard didn't know. The manila envelope I'd placed under his napkin 3 minutes earlier contained evidence that would destroy everything he'd built. And I mean everything. Let me back up. Subscribe to hear how this all started, because trust me, you're not going to believe what happens next. 6 months ago, I was living what I thought was the perfect life. Richard owned Wilkes and Morrison Financial Services, a boutique investment firm in downtown Seattle. We had the house in Magnolia, the cabin in the San Juan Islands, 2 successful kids, and what everyone called a solid marriage. I was Margaret Morrison's wife. That's how people knew me at charity events, at the country club, at school functions. Mrs. Richard Morrison, the woman who organized the annual hospital fundraiser, who never missed a tennis match, who always had fresh flowers in the house. I'd given up my career as a forensic accountant when David was born. Just temporarily, we said. Just until the kids were older. Just until Richard's business was more established. 22 years of just untils. The first crack in my perfect world came on a Tuesday in March. I was at Richard's office, surprising him with lunch for his birthday. His assistant looked panicked when I walked in. "He's in a meeting," she stammered. "Very important. Can't be disturbed." I should have left. Should have called ahead. Should have trusted him. Instead, I heard laughter from his office. Female laughter I recognized. Margaret's laugh, the one I'd heard 1,000 times at dinner parties and business events. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. "Just a minute," Richard called out. When the door finally opened, Margaret was straightening her blouse. Richard's tie was loose, his hair disheveled. They both looked guilty as teenagers caught in a basement. "Linda," Richard said, his voice too bright. "What a surprise." "Happy birthday," I said, holding up the bag from his favorite restaurant. "I brought lunch." Margaret brushed past me, avoiding eye contact. "I should get back to work," she mumbled. Richard took the bag, kissed my cheek. "This is perfect. Thank you." But his kiss felt different. Cold. Obligatory. I started paying attention after that. Really paying attention. The late nights became more frequent. The weekend emergency meetings. The business trips that always seemed to include Margaret. The way they stood just a little too close at company events. The way their eyes found each other across crowded rooms. I told myself I was imagining things. Marriage has rough patches. People work closely together. I was being paranoid. Then I found the credit card statement. It was mixed in with our regular mail, a card I didn't recognize. Richard Morrison was listed as an authorized user. Margaret Wilkes was the primary cardholder. Hotel charges in Portland. Jewelry from Tiffany. A weekend in Napa Valley. All on dates when Richard had told me he was working late or out of town alone. My forensic accounting background kicked in. I started digging. What I found was worse than an affair. Much worse. Richard and Margaret had been systematically embezzling from their clients for over 3 years. Shell companies, false invoices, diverted funds. They'd stolen nearly $2 million. But it gets worse. They'd been using my name. Linda Morrison was listed as a co-owner of several offshore accounts. My social security number was on documents I'd never seen. My forged signature was on bank transfers. They'd set me up as the fall guy. If anyone discovered the missing money, all roads would lead back to me. The wife with a forensic accounting background who had access to all of Richard's business documents. I sat in my car outside a coffee shop in Ballard, staring at the evidence spread across my passenger seat. 22 years of marriage, and my husband had been planning to frame me for his crimes. That's when I called my brother. Daniel is a federal investigator, specializes in financial crimes. I hadn't spoken to him in months, but when I explained what I'd found, his voice went cold. Linda, you need to get out of there.
Now.
This is federal wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft. If they get caught, they'll try to pin it on you. But I didn't do anything. Doesn't matter. You're the perfect patsy. The forensic accountant wife who had access to everything. They've been setting this up for years. My hands were shaking. What do? Document everything. Get copies of everything. And whatever you do, don't let them know you know. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life. I continued playing the perfect wife while secretly building a case against my husband. I copied files, traced bank transfers, documented every piece of evidence. I hired a divorce attorney who specialized in financial crimes. I opened my own bank account. I started planning my escape. But Richard and Margaret had their own timeline. They were planning to disappear after Jessica's wedding, take the money and run, leaving me to face the consequences. I found their travel plans hidden in Richard's computer. 2 tickets to Costa Rica. New identities. A house already purchased in San Jose. They were going to frame me, destroy my life, and vanish. That's when I decided to strike first. The morning of Jessica's rehearsal dinner, I received a call from my attorney. Everything's ready, she said. The FBI has the evidence. They're moving tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? We couldn't wait any longer. Richard and Margaret transferred another $100,000 yesterday. If we don't stop them now, they'll clean out the remaining accounts and disappear. I looked at myself in the mirror. In 12 hours, my life would explode. Everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for, would be gone. But I wasn't going down without a fight. The rehearsal dinner was at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Jessica had chosen the venue because it's where Richard and I had our wedding reception 24 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I watched Richard work the room, shaking hands, telling jokes, playing the successful businessman. Margaret stood beside him, her arm linked through his, playing the supportive business partner. No one knew they were planning to destroy me. During the appetizer course, I excused myself to use the restroom. Instead, I went to the front desk and asked them to deliver an envelope to Richard's seat. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a phone number and a message. Call this number before midnight if you want to make a deal. Otherwise, the FBI gets everything at 9 a.m. I returned to the table just as Richard was standing up for his toast. I want to thank everyone for being here, he began, his voice strong and confident. Jessica and Marcus, you found something special.
True partnership.
True love. He looked directly at me, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt? Regret? I couldn't tell. Marriage isn't easy, he continued. It requires sacrifice, compromise, and sometimes difficult choices. He paused, reached for his napkin, and found the envelope. His face went pale as he read it. I've decided it's time for a fresh start, he said suddenly, his voice changing. Margaret and I have built something beautiful together, and I can't pretend anymore. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Jessica started crying. Marcus stood up, looking confused and angry. But I was ready. I stood up calmly, raised my glass, and said, "To honesty." Finally. Then I walked out. My phone rang before I reached the elevator. Richard's name flashed on the screen. "What do you want?" he hissed. "I want you to confess. Tell the FBI everything. Take responsibility for what you've done."
You don't understand.
It's not that simple. Make it simple, Richard. You have until midnight. I hung up and drove home to wait. At 11:47 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Margaret. "Linda, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "Richard told me about your ultimatum. We want to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "We'll give back the money. All of it.
If you don't go to the FBI.
I laughed. Actually laughed. "You think this is about money? Isn't it? This is about you using my name. My identity. You made me an accessory to your crimes without my knowledge or consent. You were going to let me take the fall while you started a new life in Costa Rica. Silence on the other end. How did you? I'm a forensic accountant, Margaret. Did you forget? I know about the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the forged documents. I know about the house in San Jose and the plane tickets you bought for tomorrow night. More silence. We can work this out, she said finally. We're all adults here. No, I said. We're not. Because adults don't steal from their clients. Adults don't frame their spouses. Adults don't announce their affairs at their daughter's rehearsal dinner. I hung up and turned off my phone. The next morning, I woke up to pounding on my door. 2 FBI agents stood on my porch, their faces grim. Mrs. Morrison? We need to talk. For a moment, my heart stopped. Had Richard and Margaret convinced them I was involved? We arrested your husband and Margaret Wilkes this morning, one agent said. We need to go through your statement one more time. Relief flooded through me. Of course. They spent 3 hours in my kitchen, going through every detail. The timeline of my discoveries, the evidence I'd gathered, the setup they'd created using my identity. You did the right thing, the lead agent said as they prepared to leave. Without your cooperation, they would have gotten away with it. What happens now? That depends on them. If they cooperate, maybe they can work out a plea deal. If not, he shrugged. Wire fraud across state lines, money laundering, identity theft. They're looking at serious time. After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at my wedding ring. 24 years of marriage, reduced to evidence in a federal investigation. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Are you okay? I'm coming over. Then David. Mom, what the hell happened last night? Then my sister saw the news. Call me. The news. I turned on the TV and there it was. Local investment firm owners arrested in embezzlement scheme. There was a photo of Richard and Margaret being led away in handcuffs. Another photo of their office building with FBI tape across the doors. And there was a photo of me, taken from our Christmas card last year. The caption read, Wife cooperates with federal investigation. I was no longer just Mrs. Richard Morrison. I was the woman who turned in her husband. Jessica arrived within the hour, her eyes red from crying. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Neither did I, sweetheart. Not until recently. The rehearsal dinner. Why did Dad do that? Why announce it like that? I explained about the envelope, about the ultimatum, about their plan to disappear. He panicked, I said. He thought if he publicly ended our marriage, it would somehow protect him from what was coming. But it was already too late. It was too late the moment he started stealing from his clients. David arrived that evening, furious and confused. How long have you known? 3 months. And you didn't tell us? I couldn't. I needed to gather evidence first. If I'd confronted him too early, he would have destroyed everything and disappeared. So you planned this whole thing? I planned to protect myself. Your father planned to frame me for his crimes. David sat down heavily. I can't believe this is happening. I can't either. But it is. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, investigators, and reporters. The story made national news. Seattle investment firm couple accused of embezzling millions, setting up wife as fall guy. Richard and Margaret were denied bail due to flight risk. The house in Costa Rica was seized. The plane tickets were entered as evidence. I filed for divorce while Richard was in federal custody. I petitioned to have my name legally changed back to my maiden name, Linda Stevens. The hardest part was the clients. Richard and Margaret had stolen from 37 families, including several elderly couples who trusted them with their retirement funds. I met with each of them, explaining what I'd discovered, how I'd helped the FBI build their case. Some were grateful. Others were angry, questioning how I couldn't have known what was happening in my own house. I trusted him too, I told them. For 24 years, I trusted him completely. The trial lasted 6 weeks. I testified for 3 days, walking the jury through the evidence I'd gathered, the forged documents with my signature, the plan to frame me. Richard's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive wife seeking revenge. Mrs. Morrison discovered her husband's affair and decided to destroy his life out of spite, he argued.
My lawyer was ready.
Mrs. Morrison discovered her husband had been committing federal crimes and using her identity to do it. She had two choices: become an unwitting accomplice or expose the truth. She chose justice. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. Richard was found guilty on all counts: wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and conspiracy. Margaret was found guilty on all counts except identity theft. Richard was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Margaret got 8 years. At the sentencing hearing, I was allowed to make a victim impact statement. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "The defendants didn't just steal money from their clients. They stole 24 years of my life. They stole my identity, my reputation, and my sense of security." I looked at Richard, sitting at the defendant's table in his orange jumpsuit. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I spent 2 decades building a life based on trust and partnership. I supported my husband's dreams, sacrificed my own career, and believed in our future together. In return, he was planning to destroy me to save himself. I paused, gathering strength.
But I want the court to know something.
I don't regret exposing the truth. I regret that it took me so long to see it. I regret that 37 families lost their savings because I didn't look closer sooner. I turned to address the families in the courtroom. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from them, but I promise you this: I will spend the rest of my life making sure people like Richard and Margaret don't take advantage of others' trust." After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse a free woman. The media was waiting, cameras rolling, reporters shouting questions. I stopped at the microphone they'd set up. "I want to say something to anyone who might be in a similar situation," I said. "If you suspect something isn't right, investigate. If you find evidence of wrongdoing, report it. Don't let loyalty or fear stop you from doing what's right." A reporter called out, "Do you regret turning in your husband?" I thought about it for a moment. I regret that it came to this. But I don't regret protecting myself and seeking justice for the victims. What's next for you? I'm starting over. At 52, I'm rebuilding my life from scratch. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. That was 2 years ago. Today, I run a consulting firm that helps small businesses protect themselves from financial fraud. I've testified before Congress about spouse-related identity theft. I've written a book about recognizing the warning signs of financial abuse. Jessica and I have a stronger relationship than ever. The ordeal made her realize how much courage it took to stand up to Richard. David took longer to come around, but he eventually understood that I'd had no choice. I live in a small apartment in Capitol Hill now, nothing like the mansion in Magnolia, but it's mine. Every piece of furniture, every book, every photograph was chosen by me, for me. I haven't remarried. I've dated a few times, but trust doesn't come easily anymore. Maybe someday, or maybe not. Either way, I'm complete on my own. Last month, I received a letter from Richard in prison. He wanted to apologize, to explain, to somehow make amends. I read it once and threw it away. Some betrayals are too deep for apologies. But here's what he'll never understand. Destroying my old life was the greatest gift he could have given me. It forced me to discover who I really was beneath all those years of being Mrs. Richard Morrison.
I'm Linda Stevens now.
I'm a survivor, a fighter, and a woman who knows her worth. And that's worth more than any marriage built on lies. The night of Jessica's rehearsal dinner, I thought my life was ending. Turns out, it was just beginning. If you've found yourself in a situation where something doesn't feel right, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the red flags. And remember, sometimes the person closest to you is the one you need to protect yourself from most. Hit subscribe if this story resonated with you.